In a scorching desert, a luxury car stops abruptly. A rich man with an arrogant look opens the back door and drags out three identical little girls. "Stay here and don't move," was the man's last order before disappearing in a cloud of dust. Not understanding anything due to their innocence, the three-year-old triplets begin to cry desperately. Their tiny feet sink into the hot sand, but they were not alone. A majestic white horse was watching everything from among the desert dunes. What the animal does next left everyone in absolute shock. Before we dive in, if you, like us, are an animal lover, hit that subscribe button now so you don't miss any of our thrilling stories. Thanks. Now back to our story. The scorching midday sun beat down on the vast golden expanse of the Mojave Desert as a luxurious black Mercedes-Benz screeched to a halt amidst the endless dunes. The driver, clad in an impeccable Italian suit now soaked with sweat, emerged from the vehicle with abrupt, nervous movements. Richard Mason, once one of the most respected businessmen in the country, opened the rear door with trembling hands, revealing three small, identical figures strapped into their car seats. "Come on, girls," he murmured, his voice cracking as he unbuckled their safety restraints. The three-year-old triplets, still drowsy from the long journey, looked up at their father with their large brown eyes, as identical as peas in a pod. Sophia, the eldest by a mere 2 minutes, wore a delicate light blue dress. Marina, the middle child, was in a soft pink frock, while Beatrice, the youngest, wore a gentle shade of pale yellow. The man placed them on the hot sand, their little white sandals sinking slightly into the golden ground. The girls, not yet fully comprehending the situation, huddled together, their small hands clasped, as they always did when they felt scared or insecure. The hot desert wind tousled their brown hair, which their nanny had carefully styled into pigtails that morning, the same nanny Richard had permanently dismissed before embarking on this one-way trip. "Daddy just needs to take care of a few things," he said, his choked voice belying the lie. "You stay right here and be quiet." His eyes avoided meeting his daughter's confused, frightened gazes. The words of his lawyers echoed in his mind. Imminent bankruptcy, pre-trial detention, assets frozen, ongoing investigations. Everything was collapsing. Miles away, invisible to human eyes at that moment, a majestic white horse raised its head, its ears swiveling in the wind like natural antennae. Something troubled it, a silent call only it could hear. Its amber eyes, deep and mysterious, fixed on the direction from which this inexplicable disturbance emanated. Back at the site of abandonment, Sophia, always the most observant, was the first to realize something was wrong. "Daddy!" Her small voice trembled as she saw her father striding quickly back to the car. Marina squeezed her older sister's hand, while Beatrice, the most sensitive of the three, began to whimper softly. The sound of the engine starting ignited a primal panic in the three girls. "Daddy!" they cried in unison, their voices mingling with the roar of the engine. Sophia tried to run towards the car, but her short legs could barely move in the soft sand. Marina pulled her sisters closer, forming a small circle of mutual protection. Beatrice was openly sobbing now, her tears leaving shiny trails on her chubby cheeks. The Mercedes-Benz sped off, kicking up a cloud of dust that made the girls cough and rub their eyes. They watched, paralyzed by fear and incomprehension, as the car receded into the distance, becoming a tiny black dot against the golden horizon, until it finally disappeared completely. The silence that followed was deafening. Only the gentle whistle of the wind among the dunes and the sobs of the three children broke the desert stillness. The triplets hugged each other tighter, their small bodies trembling despite the intense heat. Sophia, though terrified, tried to console her sisters with awkward pats on their backs, just as their nanny used to do when they woke up scared during the night. It was in this moment of absolute despair that something extraordinary happened. A soft, almost musical whinny cut through the still desert air. The three girls simultaneously lifted their tear-stained faces, their identical expressions of fear giving way to an involuntary curiosity. Atop a nearby dune, silhouetted against the infinite blue sky, stood a figure that looked like something out of a fairy tale. A horse as white as snow, its long mane dancing in the wind like silver silk. The animal observed them with an almost human intensity, its amber eyes glowing with an ancient wisdom. The girls, still embracing, fell absolutely silent, mesmerized by the creature's majestic presence. For a brief moment, all fear seemed to dissipate, replaced by an inexplicable sense of security. Beatrice, who had always had a special connection with animals, was the first to offer a timid smile to the horse. It was a small, hesitant smile, but filled with an innocent hope that only a child could maintain in such a terrible moment. The horse, as if responding to that small gesture of trust, began to descend the dune with delicate, precise steps, its imposing figure growing larger as it approached the three small, solitary figures. The white horse stopped a few feet from the triplets, its imposing presence offering a comforting shade against the merciless sun. The girls remained motionless, still huddled together, their wide eyes fixed on the magnificent animal. The desert silence seemed to vibrate with a mysterious energy, as if the very air awaited the next move in this strange reunion. Marina, the middle child, always guided by her extraordinary intuition, was the first to feel an overwhelming thirst. Her small lips were already beginning to crack from the intense heat, and she unconsciously licked them, pouting in discomfort. As if perfectly understanding the gesture, the white horse tilted its head slightly to the west, its ears twitching purposefully. "Water," Marina whispered, her small voice carrying an inexplicable certainty. "There's water over there." Her sisters looked at her with absolute confidence. Since they were very young, they had learned to trust Marina's special feelings. When she said something was about to happen, it invariably did. The horse took a few delicate steps in the indicated direction, then stopped and looked back, as if inviting the girls to follow. Beatrice, tears still drying on her cheeks, let out a soft giggle, the first sound of joy since their abandonment. "He wants us to go with him," she said, her natural connection with animals allowing her to perfectly understand the horse's intentions. Sophia, exercising her natural leadership even at 3 years old, was the first to take a hesitant step towards the animal. Her sisters followed instantly, their small hands still clasped, forming a little human chain. The horse maintained a slow, steady pace, perfectly matching the rhythm of the small legs following it. As they walked, the sun began its descent on the horizon, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink that reflected magically on the horse's white coat. The girls, despite their fatigue and thirst, remained determined, occasionally exchanging identical looks of mutual encouragement. When one stumbled in the soft sand, the other two instantly steadied her, their triple bond acting as an invisible safety net. After what seemed like an eternity to the little travelers, the horse led them to a rock formation that rose abruptly from the dunes. There, partially hidden among the stones, was a small crystal-clear spring, a miraculous oasis in the midst of the golden immensity of the desert. The triplets gasped in unison at the sight of the water. Sophia, always practical, first tested the liquid with her little finger, just as their nanny always did before giving them anything to drink. Satisfied with her impromptu inspection, she helped her sisters kneel by the spring, and together they drank avidly, their small, cupped hands bringing the cool water to their thirsty mouths. The white horse watched patiently, its amber eyes reflecting the light of the setting sun. When the girls had finally quenched their thirst, it approached the spring to drink as well, its elegant movement mesmerizing its 3 spectators. Beatrice, fascinated, reached out her little hand, and to her sister's surprise, the majestic animal allowed her to touch its velvety muzzle. "He's magical," Beatrice declared, with the absolute conviction only a 3-year-old can possess. Her sisters nodded solemnly, accepting the statement as unquestionable truth. The horse whinnied softly, as if agreeing with the assertion. Night approached rapidly, bringing with it a biting cold that contrasted sharply with the day's heat. The girls, still in their delicate summer dresses, began to shiver. The horse, once again demonstrating its inexplicable intelligence, guided them to a small alcove among the rocks where the wind could not penetrate. Sophia arranged her sisters in the sheltered space, positioning them so they could share the warmth of their small bodies. Marina, in the middle as always, closed her eyes and murmured, "Help is coming tomorrow." Beatrice was already almost asleep, her small hand still outstretched towards the horse, which had strategically positioned itself at the entrance of the alcove like a silent guardian. As stars began to dot the desert sky, the 3 girls drifted off to sleep, exhausted but safe under the protection of their unlikely savior. What they didn't know was that, at that very moment miles away, an elderly Native American woman awoke with a start from a vivid dream of 3 identical little figures lost in the dunes. Her eyes, clouded by age but bright with determination, fixed on the desert where the full moon was beginning its ascent in the dark horizon. Ayana woke before sunrise, her old bones protesting the sudden movement. The dream was still vivid in her mind. 3 identical girls, small as flower buds, lost in the vastness of the desert. Her 75 years of life in the desert had taught her never to ignore dreams. They were messages from the spirits, whispered in the night. With movements practiced over decades of desert life, she prepared her morning herbal tea, sweetening it with wild honey her late husband had so loved. As the first light of dawn painted the sky pink and gold, Ayana organized her small travel bundle: water, dried fruit, some jerky, her old woolen shawl for the cold nights. She knew the desert's needs well. In the small corral beside her modest home, her old horse, Spirit Runner, greeted her with a familiar nicker. "Yes, my old friend," she murmured, stroking the animal's neck. "Today we have a sacred journey." Her wrinkled fingers, nimble despite her age, adjusted the saddle straps with the precision of one who knew every buckle and knot. Meanwhile, in the rocky shelter, the triplets awoke with the first rays of sun. Sophia, always the first to wake, marveled at the white horse still standing guard at the entrance. Throughout the night, it hadn't moved an inch from its protective post. Its amber eyes met hers, conveying an inexplicable calm. Marina sat up, rubbing her sleepy eyes. "People are coming," she whispered, her voice carrying that mysterious certainty her sisters had learned to trust. Beatrice, still drowsy, hugged her sisters, seeking the familiar comfort of their warmth. The horse whinnied softly, drawing the girls' attention. With deliberate steps, it approached the spring, indicating they should drink. The 3 small figures followed obediently, their white sandals already stained by the red desert sand. In the nearest town, the sheriff's office was starting its day with the usual routine. Sergeant Miller was listlessly flipping through reports when a familiar figure walked through the door. Ayana, the old Native American woman whom everyone respected but few took seriously. "3 girls," she announced without preamble, her voice hoarse but firm, identical as dewdrops lost among the dunes of Red Valley. The sergeant sighed, bracing himself for another of the old woman's visions. In recent years, since her husband's death, Ayana had become known for her premonitions, some surprisingly accurate, others not so much. "Ms. Ayana," he began respectfully, "we don't have any reports of missing children." But the old woman cut him off with an impatient wave of her wrinkled hand. "Not yet you don't," she declared with conviction, "but you will. And when you do, it will be too late." Without waiting for a reply, Ayana spun on her heel and left the station, her colorful shawl fluttering like a banner of determination. Sergeant Miller watched her go, a slight unease growing in his chest. In all his years of service, he had learned that sometimes the most unlikely stories carried the most important truths. Back in the desert, the sun was already high when the white horse began to grow restless. Its ears twitched constantly, picking up sounds the girls couldn't hear. Sophia, noticing the change in her protector's demeanor, gathered her sisters closer. It was then that the wind shifted. Marina, with her heightened sensitivity, was the first to notice. "A storm is coming," she murmured, her large eyes fixed on the horizon where dark clouds were beginning to form. The horse whinnied in agreement, its magnificent body as taut as a violin string. Beatrice began to cry softly, frightened by the sudden change in atmosphere. The air, previously dry and hot, became heavy and electrified. The horse, once again demonstrating its extraordinary intelligence, began to guide the girls away from the spring towards a higher rock formation. On the opposite horizon, Ayana, mounted on her old horse, observed the same signs in the sky. Her experienced eyes recognized the harbingers of a sandstorm, one of the desert's most feared dangers. "Quickly, Spirit Runner," she murmured, gently urging her horse on. "We have to find them before the storm does." The wind increased with each minute, carrying with it the first grains of sand. The triplets, following their white guardian, struggled to keep their eyes open against the increasingly dense dust. The horse led them purposefully, as if it knew a secret path only it could see through the curtain of sand that was beginning to envelop the desert. The sandstorm turned day into an eerie twilight. The white horse, now almost invisible in the orange gloom, guided the triplets with unwavering determination through the chaos. Sophia kept one hand firmly clasped in the animal's silky mane, while her other held Marina, who in turn wouldn't let go of Beatrice, a human chain of 3 identical links battling the desert's fury. "There!" Marina suddenly cried, her voice almost lost in the wind's roar. Her eyes, always sensitive to the desert's hidden signs, had caught the dark silhouette of an opening among the rocks. The white horse whinnied in approval, adjusting its course a few degrees to the left. The cave appeared before them like a miracle in the storm. It was a natural opening in the rock, narrow enough to keep them sheltered, but deep enough to accommodate both the girls and their equine guardian. The horse practically nudged the 3 of them inside with its muzzle, entering right after them. The sudden silence inside the cave was almost deafening after the storm's roar. The girls hugged each other, trembling not from cold, but from relief. Their pastel dresses, once so delicate, were now stained red by the desert sand. It was Beatrice who first noticed the markings on the walls. "Look," she whispered, pointing with her little finger at the rocky surfaces around them. As their eyes adjusted to the dimness, shapes began to emerge from the darkness, ancient petroglyphs preserved by the dry desert climate. Sophia picked up a small dry twig from the cave floor and, remembering the stories her nanny used to read, rubbed it against a stone until she managed a faintly glowing ember. The weak light revealed an impressive scene. Human figures painted in ochre and black, being guided through dunes by a large white horse. "It's the same!" exclaimed Marina, her eyes wide with astonishment. The white horse approached the wall, its amber eyes studying the ancient paintings with an almost human intensity. The girls watched, fascinated, as it gently touched one of the painted horse figures with its muzzle. Meanwhile, miles away, Ayana and her horse, Spirit Runner, had found shelter in a small depression between the dunes. The old woman kept her eyes closed, her lips moving in a silent prayer. In her mind, the image of the 3 girls remained crystal clear, but now there was something else, the figure of a white horse, shining like the full moon. "The Guardian," she murmured, finally recognizing the full meaning of her vision. Stories of the desert's white horse had filled her own childhood, a protective spirit that appeared only to those who most needed help. Her grandmother had sworn she was saved by it during a similar storm more than 70 years ago. In town, Sergeant Miller was beginning to regret not having paid more attention to Ayana's words. The sandstorm, arriving so suddenly, seemed like a grim omen. Something in his cop's gut told him the old woman was right. There were children lost in the desert. Back in the cave, the triplets had snuggled against the white horse's warm flank, forming a small nest of comfort. The animal had strategically lain down, creating a protective barrier between them and the cave entrance, from where the wind's howl could still be heard. "Tell us a story," Beatrice asked Sophia, as she always did before falling asleep at home. Her older sister hesitated for a moment, then began to narrate, her small voice echoing softly in the cave. "Once upon a time, there were 3 princesses who lived in the desert. Marina, between her sisters as always, completed, and they had a magical friend, a white horse that shone like the moon." The horse whinnied softly, as if appreciating its inclusion in the story. Beatrice smiled, her eyes already heavy with sleep. The girls didn't realize when they drifted off, lulled by the distant sound of the storm and the comforting warmth of their protector. In their shared dreams, something that occasionally happened since they were babies, they rode freely through the desert on the white horse's back, their laughter echoing across the golden dunes. The storm raged on through the night, but inside the ancient cave guarded by their mystical protector, the triplets slept the sleep of the innocent. The petroglyphs on the walls seemed to come alive in the occasional flash of lightning, telling and retelling a story that in some mysterious way was repeating itself through the centuries. At the cave entrance, the white horse maintained its silent vigil, its amber eyes gleaming in the darkness like ancient stars. Its majestic body, still dusted with the red sand of the storm, emanated a soft, supernatural light, as if reflecting moonlight, even without a moon in the tempestuous sky. In the empty Mason mansion, Richard wandered the halls like a ghost, his footsteps echoing on the Italian marble floors. 48 hours had passed since he had abandoned his daughters in the desert, and the weight of his actions was beginning to crush his sanity. In every room, memories assaulted him like daggers. In the triplets' room, 3 identical little beds remained perfectly made, their pink comforters untouched. On each pillow, a different stuffed unicorn, Sophia's blue, Marina's pink, Beatrice's pale yellow, seemed to stare at him with their button eyes, accusatory in their silence. "I had no choice," he muttered to the empty room, his voice hoarse from crying. But even to his own ears, the justification sounded hollow. On the nightstand, a photograph of the girls at their last birthday mocked his conscience. 3 identical smiles, 3 pairs of dimples, 3 pairs of brown eyes brimming with love and trust. The phone rang, making him jump. It was his lawyer, with more devastating news. "The police are on their way, Richard. Someone reported the girls missing." His legs buckled and he slid down the wall until he was sitting on the floor. "How?" he whispered. "Nobody knew." Lee, at the sheriff's station, Sergeant Miller examined the photos of the triplets that the nanny, consumed by guilt, had finally brought in. "They were acting strangely yesterday morning," the woman explained between sobs. "Mr. Mason had never taken them out alone before. I should have suspected something." Meanwhile, in the desert, the storm was finally subsiding. The sun rose behind the transformed dunes, revealing a landscape altered by the wind's fury. The white horse guided the girls out of the cave, its hooves finding sure footing among the rocks. Sophia, ever practical, tried to brush the sand off her sister's dresses, a habit learned from the nanny. Marina kept her eyes fixed on the horizon, as if she could see something beyond the golden dunes. "More people are looking for us now," she announced with her characteristic certainty. Beatrice, who had slept nestled against the horse's neck, remained remarkably calm. "He says someone good is coming," she declared, stroking her protector's muzzle. Her sisters nodded, accepting her translation of the horse's thoughts without question. In the simple logic of their 3-year-old minds, it was perfectly natural for Beatrice to understand the animal's silent language. The horse led them back to the spring, which had miraculously survived the storm. While the girls drank and washed their faces, it remained alert, its ears constantly twitching, picking up sounds imperceptible to human ears. Ayana emerged from her temporary shelter as soon as the sun rose, her aching joints protesting the movement. "Come on, spirit runner," she murmured to her faithful horse. "They're close, I can feel it." The old horse nickered in response, as if sharing its owner's urgency. In town, a young reporter named Clara Vance adjusted her protective scarf against the sun as she studied a map of the region. For months, she had been investigating Richard Mason's suspicious activities, and the sudden disappearance of his daughters set off alarm bells in her trained mind. "The search will begin in 2 hours," Sergeant Miller informed her, marking areas on the map. Clara nodded, but her eyes were fixed on a specific point in the desert. "And here?" she asked, pointing to a region known as Red Valley. The old native woman mentioned this area specifically. The sergeant hesitated. After the previous night's storm, Ayana's words weighed on his conscience. "I'll send a team there too," he finally agreed. Clara smiled, satisfied. Years of investigative reporting had taught her to trust her instincts, and something told her the answer lay in that direction. Back in the desert, the triplets had found shade under a rock formation. The white horse grazed peacefully nearby, its graceful movements mesmerizing the girls. Sophia was braiding small desert wildflowers into Marina's hair, while Beatrice hummed an old lullaby their nanny used to sing. It was then that Marina froze, her wide eyes fixed on a distant point. "There's a lady coming," she whispered, "a good lady who dreamed about us." Her sisters immediately looked in the direction she indicated, though they couldn't yet see anything beyond the undulating dunes. The white horse raised its majestic head, its ears pointed in the same direction. Its amber eyes gleamed with an ancient knowledge, as if recognizing the approach of someone long expected. The sun was already high when Ayana spotted the first clue. Tiny footprints in the sand, 3 identical pairs, partially preserved from the storm by a rocky outcrop. Her weathered heart quickened in her chest. The children from her vision had passed this way. But they weren't alone. Alongside the childish marks were the prints of a horse, deep and precise. "The guardian found them," she murmured, tears of relief shining in her tired eyes. The stories her grandmother used to tell came back to her. The white horse of the desert, guardian of the lost, protector of the innocent. In 75 years of life in the dunes, she had never seen it, but she had always known the ancient legends carried deep truths. At the sheriff's station, Clara Vance examined old photographs of the Red Valley region. Something in one of the images caught her attention, petroglyphs showing a white horse guiding people through the desert. The caption, handwritten by some anonymous researcher, read, "The legend of the Dune Guardian, repeated through generations." "Sergeant Miller," she called out, her voice laced with urgency. "Do you know this legend?" The officer approached, adjusting his glasses to examine the photograph. His service-hardened face softened with recognition. "My grandmother used to tell that story," he replied, his voice distant with memories. "They say the white horse appears to protect those truly in need." In the back of a police cruiser, Richard Mason listened to the conversation with desperate interest. After his partial confession, he had admitted to leaving the girls somewhere in the desert, but shock and guilt had muddled his memory of the exact location. The police were keeping him close during the search. "A white horse," he muttered, suddenly remembering something he had glimpsed in his rearview mirror as he drove away from his daughters. At the time, he had dismissed it as a heat mirage and his troubled conscience. But now, in the dunes, the triplets played under the watchful eye of their equine guardian. Sophia had organized a small picnic with fruits the horse had helped them find in a small, hardy bush, wild figs, small but juicy. Marina methodically divided the fruit, ensuring each sister received the same amount. Beatrice, sitting closest to the horse, occasionally offered it a fig, giggling when its velvety lips tickled her palm. "He says the good lady is almost here," she announced, her childish voice carrying a serene certainty. As if responding to Beatrice's words, a dark spot appeared on the horizon. The white horse raised its majestic head, its ears pricked towards the slowly approaching figure. Mounted on her old horse, Ayana emerged from the distance like an apparition, her colorful shawl dancing in the desert wind. The girls showed no fear. Somehow, through their special connection, they knew this was the person Marina had foreseen, the good lady who had dreamed of them. Sophia, exercising her natural leadership, was the first to stand up and wave, her sisters immediately mimicking her gesture. Ayana nearly fell off Spirit Runner when she spotted the three small figures. They were exactly as in her vision, three dewdrops dressed in pastel shades, now stained by the red desert sand. And there, majestic and impossible to ignore, was he, the legendary white horse, its coat gleaming under the midday sun like freshly fallen snow. "Great Spirit," she whispered, tears streaming down her wrinkled cheeks. The horse approached her first, gently nuzzling her shoulder as if recognizing her from some ancestral dream. The girls watched the scene with interest, but without surprise. In their young minds, it was perfectly natural for their magical friend to know this mysterious lady. "You are very brave," Ayana said, dismounting with difficulty. To her surprise, the girls smiled, as if they perfectly understood her words. Marina approached first, taking the old woman's wrinkled hand in her own small ones. "You dreamed about us," she stated simply. It wasn't a question. Ayana nodded, marveling at the ancient wisdom she saw in the child's eyes. Sophia and Beatrice joined their sister, forming a small circle around the old woman. The white horse watched the scene with its amber eyes, as if satisfied with this predestined encounter. The desert wind blew softly, carrying with it the echo of ancient stories, of mystical protections and sacred encounters that repeated themselves through the centuries in the golden sands of the desert. The moment of peace between Ayana and the triplets was interrupted by a distant sound, the rhythmic thumping of approaching helicopter blades. The white horse raised its majestic head, its ears twitching nervously. Beatrice, always attuned to her protector, immediately sensed its unease. "He doesn't want us to go yet," she said, clinging to the animal's silver mane. Her sisters, sharing the same instinctive apprehension, moved closer to the horse. Ayana watched the scene with deep interest. In all her years in the desert, she had never witnessed such an extraordinary connection between humans and animal. The search and rescue helicopter appeared on the horizon, its dark silhouette stark against the infinite blue sky. Inside, Clara Vance clutched her professional camera, her fingers trembling with anticipation. Beside her, Sergeant Miller adjusted his binoculars, searching for any sign of life among the golden dunes. It was Clara who spotted them first, a brilliant white dot that stood out against the ochre landscape. "There!" she shouted, pointing. The pilot adjusted course, and as they drew nearer, the scene below unfolded so extraordinarily that Clara almost dropped her camera. "Impossible," muttered Sergeant Miller, rubbing his eyes behind the binoculars. There were the three missing girls, perfectly alive, alongside an elderly Native American woman he recognized as Ayana. But what truly left him speechless was the magnificent white horse that seemed to glow with its own light under the desert sun. The helicopter began its descent at a safe distance, but the wind from its rotors kicked up a cloud of sand that enveloped the small group. The girls clung to each other, frightened by the noise and confusion. The white horse strategically positioned itself, using its body as a shield against the artificial storm. When the dust settled and the engine was cut, a heavy silence fell over the desert. Clara was the first to jump from the aircraft, her camera capturing every historic moment. Sergeant Miller followed, still stunned by the scene unfolding before him. It was then that something extraordinary happened. The white horse, which until then had maintained a protective stance beside the girls, took a step forward. Its amber eyes met the reporters, and Clara felt a shiver run down her spine. There was an ancient, profound intelligence in that gaze. "Wait!" cried Beatrice as the officers began to approach. "He wants to show us something first." As if confirming her words, the horse whinnied softly and began to walk towards the dunes, pausing after a few steps to look back, clearly inviting them all to follow. Sophia, ever practical even at 3, took Ayana's hand. "We have to go," she said with a seriousness that seemed unsuited to her age. Marina was already moving, her eyes fixed on the horse. "It's important," she added, her voice carrying that mysterious certainty that characterized her. Sergeant Miller started to protest, but Clara cut him off. "Let them go," she whispered, her journalistic intuition telling her she was about to witness something extraordinary. "Let's follow them." Reluctant but intrigued, the officer agreed. The small group followed the white horse across the dunes. The triplets, seemingly tireless, stayed close to the animal, occasionally exchanging significant glances. Ayana walked with renewed energy, as if the years had suddenly become lighter on her shoulders. After about 15 minutes of walking, the horse stopped abruptly. Before them, partially buried in the sand, was the entrance to an ancient temple. Weather-worn symbols decorated the exposed stones, and in the center, perfectly preserved, was the image of a white horse, identical to their living guide. Clara photographed frantically, scarcely believing her luck. Sergeant Miller, born and raised in this region, was dumbfounded. In 30 years of patrolling the desert, he had never known of this place's existence. "The lost temple of the spirit horse," murmured Ayana, her trembling hands touching the ancient inscriptions. "My grandmother spoke of it, the sacred place where the guardian spirit of the desert was first sighted 1,000 years ago." The white horse nuzzled a specific area of the wall, drawing everyone's attention. There, under centuries of sand and wind, an inscription began to reveal itself. "The guardian will return in times of greatest need, guiding the lost and protecting the innocent until justice is restored." The discovery of the ancient temple changed everything. As Clara transmitted the first images to her newsroom via satellite phone, a team of archaeologists was already en route. Sergeant Miller alternated between coordinating the rescue operation by radio and watching, amazed, as the triplets interacted with the mysterious white horse. "The inscriptions speak of 3 sisters," Ayana translated, her wrinkled fingers delicately tracing the ancient characters on the temple wall. 3 identical children who, guided by the guardian, would bring justice and healing for a great injustice. Her words hung in the hot desert air, laden with meaning. Sophia, Marina, and Beatrice sat in a semicircle near the temple entrance, sharing water and cookies the rescue team had brought. The white horse remained close, its amber eyes occasionally reflecting the sunlight in a way that seemed supernatural. "Daddy was crying when he left us," Sophia said suddenly, her small voice echoing in the temple's silence. Marina nodded, playing with the crumbs of her cookie. "He was scared," she added, her characteristic intuition coloring her words. Beatrice, who had been silently conversing with the horse in her special way, looked up. "The Guardian says Daddy needs to fix what he broke," she declared, with the straightforward simplicity of a 3-year-old. Clara, having ended her call, approached the group carefully. In her years of investigative reporting, she had unraveled countless corruption schemes, but nothing had prepared her for this story. "Do you know," she began gently, "that your father did things that hurt many people?" The triplets exchanged identical glances, a silent conversation passing between them. It was Marina who answered. "The ancient people of the land are sad. They lived here before." The horse whinnied softly, as if confirming her words. Ayana, who had approached to listen, froze upon hearing this. "The tribal lands," she whispered. "The luxury resort." Her hands trembled now. "Richard Mason. He was the one who bought my tribe's sacred lands for a pittance, promising to preserve them, but then he built that monstrous resort," Clara completed, her journalistic notes finally connecting. "He displaced families who had lived there for generations. Sergeant Miller, who had approached silently, bowed his head in acknowledgement. His own family had been among those affected." The white horse moved then, its majestic figure silhouetted against the golden light filtering through the temple opening. With deliberate steps, it approached a specific section of the ancient wall, where more inscriptions were revealed beneath centuries of sand. "Here," Ayana called, her voice trembling with emotion, "it speaks of a cycle of retribution, when innocent blood returns to heal the wounds of the land." Her tear-filled eyes turned to the triplets, the children. "They are the key to fixing what was broken." As if responding to her words, a sudden wind swept through the temple, making the sand dance in golden spirals around the white horse. The girls laughed, delighted by the spectacle, their childish voices echoing off the ancient walls like silver bells. "Look!" exclaimed Clara, her camera capturing the extraordinary moment. Where the sunlight touched the walls through the temple opening, new symbols began to reveal themselves, an ancient language that had remained hidden for centuries, awaiting the right moment to be discovered. "It's a map," murmured Ayana, her experienced eyes recognizing the rock formations depicted in the ancient drawings. "A map of the sacred lands and the hidden waters beneath them." Her voice trembled with realization. "The resort was built over an ancestral aquifer." The white horse then whinnied, a sound that seemed to reverberate through the centuries. Beatrice, naturally attuned to it, widened her eyes. "He says the water wants to come back," she translated simply, "to make the desert bloom again." Sophia and Marina rose simultaneously, as if pulled by an invisible thread. The three sisters positioned themselves beside the horse, their small figures casting long shadows on the ancient walls. In that moment, observing the extraordinary scene, everyone present felt they were witnessing something larger than themselves. A moment where past and present intertwined, where justice and redemption converged through the innocence of three small children and the ancient wisdom of a mystical guardian. At the sheriff's station, Richard Mason stared at the photographs of the newly discovered temple that Clara had sent to the police. His hands trembled as he recognized the ancient symbols, the same ones he had ignored when he ordered his bulldozers to destroy part of the tribal lands to build his luxury resort. "You knew," said the sheriff, his voice heavy with a dangerous calm. "You knew about the historical significance of the site, the aquifer, everything." It wasn't a question. Richard bowed his head, decades of arrogance crumbling under the weight of guilt. Tears began to fall on the photographs in his hands. "My daughters," he whispered, "the desert protected them better than I ever could." The sheriff watched the broken man before him, remembering the words Ayana had relayed over the radio. "The Guardian chooses his protected ones, and through them, justice finds its way." In the ancient temple, a team of archaeologists worked feverishly to document every detail of the inscriptions. The triplets, still under the watchful eye of the white horse, observed the activity with childlike curiosity. Sophia arranged small stones in geometric patterns, Marina whispered with the wind, and Beatrice continued her silent conversation with the guardian. "It's extraordinary," commented the lead archaeologist, Dr. Yasmin Kamal, adjusting her glasses as she studied the ancient scriptures. These inscriptions speak of a cycle of protection and justice that repeats through the centuries. And it always involves children, innocence as an instrument of transformation. Clara, who hadn't put down her notepad, approached the girls. "Aren't you scared?" she asked gently. The three little ones looked at each other, sharing one of those moments of silent communication that characterized them. "The guardian showed us the way the whole time," Sophia replied, her small voice carrying a wisdom beyond her years. Marina agreed. "And Grandma Ayana was looking for us too." Beatrice completed, "Now, we need to help Daddy fix what he broke." Ayana, who was resting in the shade of an ancient column, rose abruptly. "Grandma," she repeated, her heart quickening. The girls smiled in unison, that identical smile that would melt the hardest heart. Marina approached the old woman, taking her wrinkled hands in her own small ones. "You're our mommy's mommy," she declared simply. "That's why you dreamed about us." The white horse whinnied softly, as if confirming the revelation. Ayana swayed, long-buried memories surfacing like water in a deep well. "Amira," she whispered, tears streaming down her wrinkled cheeks. "My daughter. She ran off with a man from the city." Her hands trembled as she stroked Marina's face. "I never knew she had daughters. Did she die in childbirth?" The triplets nodded simultaneously. The white horse approached, gently nuzzling Ayana's shoulder. In that touch, a wave of understanding washed over the old woman. Her daughter had tried to come home before giving birth but hadn't made it in time. Clara documented everything, her hands barely able to keep up with the speed of the revelations. The story had begun as an investigation into corporate corruption, but was transforming into something much larger, an intricate tapestry of redemption, family, and ancestral justice. "The aquifer, Doctor," Kamal said suddenly, her eyes fixed on a specific section of the inscriptions. "It didn't just feed these lands. There's an entire subterranean network of ancient channels. If restored—" She paused, the implications of her discovery leaving her speechless. "The desert can bloom again," Ayana completed, finally understanding the magnitude of what was happening. The tribal lands, the ancient knowledge, everything was protected here, waiting for the right moment. The white horse moved then, guiding the triplets to a specific wall of the temple. There, partially covered by centuries of sand, a painting showed three small figures holding hands before a large reflecting pool that mirrored a starry sky. "That's us!" exclaimed Beatrice, her eyes shining with delight. Sophia touched the ancient painting with reverence, while Marina closed her eyes, as if listening to something only she could hear. "The Guardian says it's time," Beatrice announced, her small voice echoing in the ancient temple. As if responding to her words, a gentle wind began to blow, carrying with it the distant sound of running water, a sound the desert hadn't heard in centuries. The sound of water grew, echoing through the ancient walls of the temple like a long-forgotten song. The triplets, still guided by the white horse, walked to the center of the main hall, where an elaborately carved stone circle marked the floor. "It's a seal," explained Dr. Kamal, her voice trembling with academic excitement. "The ancient inhabitants sealed the aquifer when they realized greedy people wanted to exploit the sacred water." Her hands traced the inscriptions with reverence. "But they left instructions to reopen it when the chosen ones returned." The white horse positioned itself strategically, its hooves touching specific points on the stone circle. The girls, as if guided by an ancestral memory flowing in their blood, took their own places in the design. Sophia to the north, Marina to the south, and Beatrice to the east, forming a perfect triangle with the Guardian. "Wait!" a hoarse voice cried from the temple entrance. Richard Mason, handcuffed and escorted by two officers, stumbled towards his daughters. The sheriff, after his full confession, had allowed him to witness what was about to happen. The triplets turned in unison to look at their father, their identical faces showing not fear or anger, but a surprising compassion for such young children. The white horse held its position, its amber eyes studying the broken man with ancient wisdom. "My girls," Richard sobbed, falling to his knees in the sand. "Forgive me. Forgive your father." Tears streamed freely down his face, washing away layers of pride and arrogance accumulated over the years. Ayana approached her son-in-law, this man she should hate, but now saw only as another lost soul needing redemption. "You can fix what you broke," she said softly, "starting now." Clara recorded every moment, her camera capturing the extraordinary light that began to emanate from the stone circle. The wind inside the temple picked up, making everyone's clothes dance as if they had a life of their own. "It is time," announced Marina, her small voice carrying an echo of ancient truths. Sophia and Beatrice nodded, and as if rehearsed for millennia, the three began to sing. It wasn't a song anyone there knew. It was something older, deeper, a melody that seemed to come from the earth itself. The white horse raised its majestic head and whinnied, the sound blending harmoniously with the girls singing. The stone circle beneath their feet began to glow with a bluish light, and the inscriptions on the temple walls seemed to come alive, dancing with shadows and light. "The scriptures!" exclaimed Dr. Kamal, her eyes wide with academic astonishment. "They speak of this moment, when the three who are one sing the ancient song, and the Guardian seals their testimony, the sacred waters will return to heal the wounded land." The ground began to tremble gently, not threateningly, but like a gentle awakening. Sounds of running water grew beneath their feet, stronger and stronger, like an underground river gathering force. Richard watched his daughters with a mixture of awe and regret. In all his years in business, chasing wealth and power, he had never witnessed anything as truly valuable as this moment. "Look!" someone shouted from the temple entrance. Outside, in the seemingly endless desert, tiny green specks were beginning to emerge from the sand, shoots of long dormant plants, awakening with the return of the sacred water. The triplets' song reached its crescendo, their childish voices soaring to the heights of the ancient temple. The white horse whinnied one last time, the sound reverberating through the centuries like a final seal of approval. Then, with a sound like thousands of crystal bells, the stone circle opened. Crystal clear water gushed from the center, not with devastating force, but with the gentleness of a long-awaited blessing. The sacred liquid flowed in complex patterns through the ancient channels, following paths carved in stone thousands of years ago. The triplets laughed with joy, their voices now childlike and carefree again. The white horse gently nuzzled each of them, as if blessing them, before turning to Richard. The businessman met the mystical animal's amber eyes, and in that moment fully understood the magnitude of his mistakes and the path to his redemption. "The lands," he said, his voice hoarse but firm. "They must return to their true guardians." Ayana placed a hand on his shoulder, silent tears running down her wrinkled face. Around them, the ancient temple pulsed with new life, while outside, the desert began its transformation, a promise of renewal sealed by the laughter of three little girls and the eternal wisdom of a mystical guardian. The news spread rapidly around the world. "Miracle in the desert," blared international headlines. The images captured by Clara showed not only the archaeological discovery of the century, but also an unprecedented environmental phenomenon. The desert was literally blooming before the world's eyes. 2 weeks after the opening of the sacred aquifer, an extraordinary transformation was already visible. Where once there was only sand, plants that botanists had deemed extinct for centuries now sprouted. The ancient canal system, a feat of engineering that defied modern understanding, distributed water with mathematical precision over an area that expanded daily. At the center of it all, the triplets had settled with Ayana in a small traditional dwelling near the temple. The white horse remained nearby, though now other people could also see it. Its mission of protection had transformed into one of supervision and guidance. "The Guardian says more horses are returning," Beatrice announced at breakfast, savoring a fresh date. As if confirming her words, distant whinnies could be heard beyond the flourishing dunes. Sophia, organized as ever, had transformed a corner of the living room into a small, improvised schoolhouse where she and her sisters practiced writing the ancient symbols they'd found, sometimes with patient guidance from Ayana on tribal lore. Marina spent hours in the spontaneously sprouting gardens, her natural gift for finding water now manifesting as an ability to understand exactly what each plant needed. Richard Mason, after confessing to all his crimes and making a deal with the justice system, now dedicated every moment of his parole to righting his wrongs. The luxurious resort was being dismantled, each stone removed with care so as not to disturb the ancient channels running beneath the surface. "It's extraordinary," Dr. Kamal commented to Clara as they supervised the transformation. "The ancient hydraulic system is more advanced than much of what we have today. They understood something about the natural flow of water that we are only just beginning to rediscover." Clara, who had decided to settle permanently in the region to document the transformation, watched a group of local children playing with the triplets. The different ways they communicated, English, a few words of the local tribal language they were picking up from Ayana, and the mysterious connection they shared with the white horse, blended into a symphony of laughter and joy. "People are calling this the miracle of the three sisters," she said, her notebook always at hand. "But it's more than that, isn't it? It's as if the desert itself was waiting for the right moment to awaken." Ayana, approaching with a tray of fresh mint tea, smiled wisely. "The desert never slept," she replied, her eyes shining as she watched her granddaughters. "It merely awaited the right hearts to reveal its secrets." The white horse grazed peacefully near the temple, its coat reflecting the sunlight like freshly fallen snow. Occasionally it would raise its majestic head to observe the horizon, where other wild horses were beginning to appear. A herd everyone believed had been extinct for generations, returning as if summoned by a silent call. "The ancient text spoke of this," Dr. Kamal explained, consulting her notes. "When balance was restored, the guardians would return in greater numbers. Not just the horses, but all the creatures that once called this place home." As if illustrating her words, a hawk soared overhead, its shadow dancing on the vegetation now covering the dunes. Small desert rodents, long unseen in the region, peeked curiously from their newly established burrows. In the small, improvised schoolhouse, the triplets had begun to teach other local children the ancient songs they somehow knew instinctively. Their voices rose in the morning air like a prayer of gratitude, while their small hands drew on slates the symbols they had found on the temple walls. "They are the bridge," murmured Ayana, watching the scene with tear-filled eyes, "between the past and the future, between what was lost and what can be recovered." Her wrinkled hands caressed an old book of Native American stories that had belonged to her grandmother, the same stories now coming to life before her eyes. Richard, supervising the removal of another section of the resort, paused to watch his daughters. The man who had once measured everything in dollars and cents now found a different kind of wealth in his little girl's smiles, in the cautious respect he was beginning to regain from the local community, in the chance to be part of something truly meaningful. The sun began its descent on the horizon, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold. The white horse whinnied softly, calling the triplets for what had become a daily ritual, a moment of contemplation at sunset, when the veil between the mystical and the mundane seemed thinnest, and the ancient stories whispered loudest on the desert wind. A month after the miracle of the aquifer, an important decision needed to be made. The tribal council, gathered in the restored ancient temple, discussed the future of the sacred lands. Richard Mason, still under judicial supervision, presented his final restitution proposal. "All property titles," he said, his voice carrying a newfound humility, "will be returned to the original tribes." He placed a folder of documents on the ancient table. "And all profits generated by the resort over the last 5 years will be used to establish a foundation." The triplets, seated on colorful cushions near the stone circle where the miracle had occurred, watched the scene with interest. The white horse remained close to them, its majestic presence lending a special weight to the moment. "The Three Sisters Foundation," Richard continued, looking lovingly at his daughters, "will be jointly administered by the tribal council and chosen guardians to preserve both the ancient knowledge and the natural resources of the region." Ayana, now a respected elder of the council, ensured his words were understood by all members, while Clara recorded everything in her notebook. The journalist had discovered her own mission, to document not just the miracle, but the process of healing and reconciliation that followed. "But there's more," Beatrice interrupted suddenly, her childish voice echoing in the temple. Everyone turned to her, now accustomed to the triplets' extraordinary intuitions. "The Guardian wants to show us something." As if responding to her words, the white horse moved to the center of the stone circle. Its hooves touched specific points of the ancient design, and, to everyone's astonishment, new inscriptions began to glow on the walls, texts that had remained invisible until that moment. Dr. Kamal rushed to examine the revelations, her eyes wide with academic excitement. It's a manual," she exclaimed, "detailed instructions on how to maintain the balance of the water system, how to preserve knowledge through generations." Marina closed her eyes, as she always did when tuning into something only she could perceive. "There's more water," she whispered. "Much more. In other places too." Sophia immediately grabbed a map and, with surprising precision for a 3-year-old, began to mark specific points. "Other temples," Dr. Kamal explained, comparing the markings with ancient texts, "an entire network of them, all connected by the same aquifer system." She turned to Richard, her eyes shining. "Your resort was built on just one of the points. There are 11 others scattered throughout the desert." The tribal council erupted in animated discussions. The implications were enormous, not just one oasis, but the possibility of restoring an entire ecosystem, of reversing centuries of desertification. The white horse whinnied softly, drawing everyone's attention. Beatrice, its natural interpreter, smiled. "He says that's why it needed to be now," she translated. "With the right people, at the right time." Richard looked at his daughters with new eyes. What he had considered his greatest mistake, abandoning them in the desert, had revealed itself to be part of a much larger plan. His little girls, whom he had tried so hard to mold in his image of success, were in fact guardians of something far more precious. "There's one condition," Sophia announced suddenly, her small voice carrying surprising authority. Marina and Beatrice nodded, confirming their sister's words. The knowledge must be shared with everyone. Ayana smiled, recognizing the ancient wisdom in her granddaughter's words. No secrets this time, she agreed. What was sealed by fear will be opened by love. The tribal council discussed briefly before reaching a consensus. The Three Sisters Foundation would not just be an environmental restoration project, but a learning center where ancient knowledge and modern science could work together. "And the horses?" Clara asked, looking out through the temple entrance where several other wild horses now grazed among the growing vegetation. The white horse whinnied, and Beatrice laughed. "They are our teachers too," she translated simply. "They always have been." As if confirming her words, a young foal approached the entrance, its snow-white coat gleaming under the desert sun. Richard watched the scene with misty eyes. Where he once saw only land for real estate speculation, he now saw a living legacy, an ancient story unfolding through his own daughters. The man who had once believed he controlled destiny through contracts and figures now bowed with humility before a wisdom far older and more profound. The sun rose on a transformed desert. 6 months had passed since the miracle of the aquifer, and the once golden landscape was now painted with hues of green and life. At the study center, established near the ancient temple, researchers from around the world worked side by side with tribal elders, blending modern knowledge with ancestral wisdom. The triplets, now 3.5, had blossomed as much as the desert around them. Sophia, with surprising efficiency, coordinated a program where local children learned the ancient healing songs. Marina had developed an intuitive method of locating new water sources, guiding geological teams with her extraordinary sensitivity. Beatrice continued to be the bridge between humans and the wild horses, which now formed a considerable herd. "It's incredible," Clara commented to Ayana, watching the girls in their morning activities. "They haven't lost any of their childlike innocence, even with all this responsibility." The journalist, who had decided to write a book about the whole story, had become part of the extended family now inhabiting the site. Ayana smiled, her wrinkled eyes shining with pride. "They are children of the desert," she replied simply, "as their mother should have been." Her gaze drifted to the small shrine they had built in memory of Amira, her lost daughter. "Sometimes I think she guided us here, through them." Richard, who supervised the transformation of the old resort into an international center for environmental studies, approached the group. His face, once marked by the arrogance of power, now bore the serenity of one who had found a greater purpose. "Excavations at the 12th temple begin tomorrow," he announced, consulting his notes. "Dr. Kamal believes we can activate the complete system before the winter rains." His gaze found his daughters playing in the distance, and a soft smile softened his features. The white horse, always near the girls, raised its majestic head upon hearing the news. Other horses in the herd responded with whinnies, as if sharing a silent communication. Beatrice, naturally, was the first to understand. "They say it's time," she announced, running to the adults with her sisters close behind. "The Guardian has completed his mission." Marina nodded solemnly, while Sophia took her father's hand, offering comfort for what was to come. As if responding to an invisible call, all the wild horses began to gather near the temple. The white horse approached the triplets one last time, gently nuzzling each of them with its velvety muzzle. "He says we don't need protection anymore," Beatrice translated, tears glistening in her large eyes. "Now, we are the Guardians." The magnificent animal whinnied softly, as if confirming her words. Clara photographed the moment with trembling hands, knowing she was witnessing something words could hardly capture. The midday sun transformed the horses' coats into a kaleidoscope of light, creating an almost supernatural scene. "The ancient texts spoke of this moment," explained Dr. Kamal, who had joined the group. When balance was restored, the guardians would return to their spiritual form, leaving the knowledge in the hands of those who proved worthy. Now, the triplets hugged each other, forming their characteristic small circle of mutual support. The white horse stepped back a few paces and then, to everyone's astonishment, began to glow with its own light, growing increasingly intense. One by one, the other horses in the herd also began to shine, their physical bodies gradually transforming into pure light. The phenomenon lasted only a few minutes but would be forever etched in the memories of all present. When the light finally subsided, the horses had vanished. In the place where the guardian had stood, a small spring had spontaneously gushed from the ground, its crystal-clear water reflecting the sky like a natural mirror. "It's a gift," Marina said softly, her small hands touching the cool water. "To remember they are always here, even when we can't see them." Sophia agreed, already organizing in her practical mind how they would preserve this new sacred spot. Beatrice, whom everyone expected to be most shaken by her special friend's departure, smiled serenely. "They haven't gone," she explained to the concerned adults. "They just changed form. Now they're part of everything. The wind, the water, the plants." Ayana embraced her granddaughters, her heart overflowing with love and gratitude. Richard joined the hug, finally understanding that his true wealth had always been there in his daughters' unconditional love and the wisdom they carried so naturally. The spring continued to flow, its crystalline sound mingling with the desert wind like an ancient familiar song. The triplets began to sing spontaneously, their voices rising in the afternoon air like a prayer of gratitude, a promise of continuity, a reminder that some stories have no end. They merely transform, like desert water, finding new paths to flow through time. 10 years had passed since the desert miracle. The triplets, now 13, had grown in harmony with the land they helped awaken. Their identical faces marked by the same sweetness of childhood, but now touched by the wisdom of adolescence, still drew admiration from all who knew them. Sophia, always the natural leader, coordinated an international network of young environmental guardians. Under her precocious yet confident guidance, children from around the world learned to combine ancestral knowledge with modern technology to protect their local environments. Marina continued to develop her unique connection with water. Her intuitive maps of subterranean systems had proven more accurate than any modern equipment, leading scientists to develop new study methods based on her extraordinary sensitivity. Beatrice, though the mystical horses had departed in their physical form, maintained her special ability to communicate with animals. The wildlife sanctuary she had helped establish had become a global model for conservation and reintroduction of native species. On that special morning, the 10th anniversary of the miracle, a unique celebration was being prepared at the ancient temple. People from all over the world had gathered to witness something extraordinary: the simultaneous activation of the 12 temples, completing the circle of restoration that had begun with 3 little girls lost in the desert. "It's like a dream," commented Clara, now an award-winning documentary filmmaker, to Ayana. The native elder, her hair as white as winter snow, smiled serenely. Beside her, Richard watched his daughters with eyes moist with pride and gratitude. "It's not a dream," Ayana replied, her soft voice carrying the wisdom of decades in the desert. "It's an awakening." Her wrinkled hands caressed an ancient book, the complete story of the miracle written in English, with notes on tribal traditions, preserving every detail for future generations. The original temple, now restored to its ancient glory, was filled with people. Scientists chatted animatedly with tribal elders. Local children played with visitors from distant countries, and at the center of it all, the triplets prepared to lead the ceremony. "Can you feel it?" Marina asked suddenly, her eyes closed in concentration. Her sisters nodded. Even after all these years, their special connection remained intact. They're coming back for today. As if responding to her words, a gentle wind began to blow through the temple, carrying with it the distant sound of hooves and whinnies. Those present held their breath, recognizing the signs that had become part of the legend. The spring that had appeared where the white horse once stood began to glow with its own light. Reflections of water danced on the ancient walls, creating the illusion of horses running, their silver manes flowing in the wind. Sophia, Marina, and Beatrice took their positions on the stone circle, now teenagers, but carrying the same powerful innocence that had awakened the desert a decade ago. Their voices rose in harmony, chanting the ancient song they had learned on their first night in the cave. Around the world, at the other 11 temples, similar groups gathered. Through discreetly installed screens, everyone could see one another, united in a global circle of renewal and hope. Dr. Kamal, now director of the International Desert Studies Center, watched her monitors with tears in her eyes. Each temple showed signs of activation, ancient lights awakening, subterranean waters responding to the call of a long-forgotten but never truly lost knowledge. Richard, who had dedicated the last decade to righting his wrongs, held Ayana's hand. Together, grandfather and grandmother, they watched Amira's living legacy, not just in the 3 extraordinary girls who were his daughters, but in the entire movement of renewal they had inspired. The Triplet song reached its crescendo, and in that magical moment, everyone present could see or perhaps feel the presence of the mystical horses. Not in physical form, but as eternal guardians, weaving their energy through time and space, connecting past and future in a luminous present of possibilities. "The circle is complete," Beatrice announced, her voice carrying echoes of ancient wisdom. Sophia and Marina smiled, completing the thought in unison, but the story continues. Outside, the desert flourished in all its renewed glory. Where once there was only sand, gardens and woodlands now grew. Ancient trade routes had transformed into ecological corridors, connecting reborn oases. Knowledge sealed by fear had been reopened by love, and now flowed freely like the crystal-clear water of the sacred aquifers. The triplets embraced, their hearts beating in perfect synchrony. In their identical eyes shone the same light they had first seen in the white horse's gaze, the light of hope, of renewal, of the infinite possibility for healing and transformation. And so, in the depths of the reborn desert, 3 girls, once abandoned, became the key to a new beginning, proving that sometimes endings are just new beginnings in disguise, and that true magic lies not in miracles, but in hearts willing to believe and act for the greater good.